Thank you, Dr. Yes, for the nice introduction. And to continue on with the clinical theme, my name is Shabnam Foroughi. I am a clinical reviewer with the Division of Clinical Review within the Office of Safety and Clinical Evaluation, and today I will focus on comparative analysis update. My learning objectives are to review the comparative analysis process, to provide key principles for conducting comparative analyses, and to discuss tips for user interface assessment during product development. Generic drugs are considered to be therapeutically equivalent to the reference drug if they have the same clinical effect and safety profile when administered to the patients under the conditions specified in the labeling. The same expectations are applicable for the generic drug device combination products, and FDA considers whether end users can use a generic combination product when it is substituted for the RLD without the intervention of the healthcare professional or without additional training prior to the use of the generic product. That being said, generic and RLD products do not need to be identical as long as the differences do not preclude approval under an ANDA. The comparative user interface assessment process is a cross-office collaborative CDER process. Our groups work together on comparative analysis and comparative use human factor studies throughout the ANDA lifecycle. Note that the guidances for comparative analyses apply to different stages of the lifecycle. They apply in the pre-ANDA and ANDA submissions, but also in the submission of post-approval changes and supplements. Within the DCR, we are the lead for ANDA submission and post-approval CA assessments of combination products to ensure they have the same clinical effect and safety profile as their RLD. This slide provides an overview of the types of combination products that were submitted in ANDAs to OGD. And just like Dr. Dugas, I have a pie chart as well. And my chart represents the CA assessments done by DCR from 2018 to 2023. And as you can tell from the pie chart, injectable and oral products make up over 2/3 of the combination products submitted under the ANDAs. So the draft guidance for industry, published in 2017, provides the current recommended approach to comparative analysis in an ANDA. And I will go over the 3 comparisons in the next few slides, which are the physical comparison, the comparative task analysis, and the labeling comparison. Within each comparison, consider and include all components with which end users interact. Before going any further, let's review some key definitions. User interface, that refers to all components of the product with which a user interacts. This includes the delivery device constituent part and any associated controls, displays, product labeling, and even packaging. A critical task is a user task that, if performed incorrectly or not performed at all, would or could cause harm to the patient or the user, where harm is also defined to include compromised care. Ultimately, an external critical design attribute is a feature that directly affects how users perform a critical task that is necessary to use or administer the drug product. Let's just start with the physical comparison. In your submission, please include clear, detailed, and color photographs. And according to draft guidance for industry, in your comparison, you should consider the visual, the auditory, the tactile examination of the physical features of the proposed generic to the RLD, such as the size, the shape, the color, the resistance, and even the sound. Include all components necessary to deliver the drug, from packaging to the connectors, and external design mechanisms and features should also be noted. Ultimately, please clearly identify, characterize, and provide justifications for the differences noted. For the comparative task analysis, we recommend that you physically manipulate the device and systematically analyze and compare the sequential activities required for the end users to use the generic drug product and administer the drug product. Be sure to include all steps with which end users need to perform to use the device, from opening the packaging to disposing of the product, and highlight the differences in tasks that arise due to differences in user interface design. Be sure to note if those differences may impact an existing critical task or even give rise to a new critical task. For the labeling comparison, use the current version of the RLD labeling. Ensure that labeling, including IFU and images, accurately describe your proposed generic combination product. Make sure that all the tasks necessary to use the generic combination product is also identified. Generic drug product labeling generally must be the same as the RLD. However, certain limited exceptions are allowed, and those will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Be sure to evaluate labeling statements on the container label and even carton labeling. These may include important elements that are intended to minimize medication errors or use errors. IFU differences may also reflect differences seen in comparative task analysis. According to the draft guidance for industry, for each comparison, you select an outcome, and those outcomes are no difference, minor design difference, and an other design difference. All identified differences should be considered, again, within the context of the overall risk profile of the product. If you choose the outcome of no difference, please provide explanation in the comparative analyses to support your assertion that there are truly no differences in the design of your proposed user interface as compared to the user interface of the RLD. A minor design difference, on the other hand, will not affect an external critical design attribute. For instance, the different color of the plunger rod for a prefilled syringe, and also knowing that the color of the plunger rod is not critical to the correct use of the device. If FDA agrees that the design differences is a minor design difference, then it would likely be acceptable. On the other hand, an other design difference is one that may impact an external critical design attribute that involves administration of the product. When you have other design differences, consider redesigning the user interface to minimize differences from the RLD or provide additional data to support the user interface design difference. The type of information and data will depend on the differences and risks to be considered. With appropriate outcome classification and justification, it is reassuring to know that most deficiencies are communicated and resolved within the review cycle. Indeed, between 2018 and 2023, 90% of the CE assessments that were done by DCR were found to be adequate, and only 10% of them had another design differences that were inadequate. Now let's go over some general recommendations. Identify and provide adequate justification for all the differences in the user interface in your comparative analysis. Focus on potential differences in the critical tasks between the RLD and your generic drug product combination. Always consider the context of use. Let's go over the context of use. For instance, a drug may be intended for an emergency use versus non-emergency use. The frequency of use is also important. Is it intended for single use or repeated use by the end users? The end users may be your lay users who have no experience with the drug. That may be a patient or a caregiver versus an experienced healthcare professional. Ultimately, also consider the environment of use. Is this drug going to be used in a non-clinical setting, such as homes and schools, or in a healthcare setting, such as inpatient hospitals or outpatient clinics? Ultimately, always consider your patient populations, those who suffer from dexterity issues, from a rheumatologic or a neuromuscular disorder. To continue with the tips for your comparative analysis, know that design differences are product specific and must be analyzed within the context of their comparison to their RLD. If the RLD is discontinued and or unavailable, we highly recommend submitting a controlled correspondence or a pre-ANDA meeting request to discuss the alternative approach with the agency. Use the to-be-marketed generic information product in your comparative analysis. Engage with FDA early during your product development via controlled correspondences and pre-ANDA processes. Submit your comparative analyses, the samples of your products, and specific questions in pre-ANDA communications request. And if you identify other design differences, we again highly recommend discussing that early with us. Incorporate recommendations in the draft comparative analysis guidance throughout your combination product, and where able, design the generic product to minimize differences in user interface and critical task as compared to its RLD. Perform your comparative analysis throughout the development program, especially if changes are made. Let's talk about the changes. Generally, when there are changes to your proposed product after approval, these are submitted as a post-approval changes and supplements. Again, DCR is the lead for the assessment of the comparative analysis submitted with post-approval changes and supplements. A change may be a change that's applicable to the device constituent part. For instance, if a new oral dosing syringe is needed to replace the approved dropper, or a change from a single-use vial to a prefilled syringe, or a change of the color of the dust cap of the inhalation device to match the RLD. Some of those changes may also apply to the labeling, to revise the graphics and the text of the instructions for use to be consistent with the RLD updates, or to represent the revised needle shield without other device changes. In all those situations, submit a CA report with supplements reflecting changes to the device and device-related labeling, and mention the CA report in your cover letter or submit it in Module 5, which is the preferred module for the submission of those CAs, and compare the updated drug-device combination back to the RLD. Again, when in doubt, submit a CA report with changes and consider a controlled correspondence with us. Now, time for a challenge question number 2, true or false. The physical comparison includes visual, auditory, tactile examination of the physical features of the proposed product compared to the RLD. Of course, the answer is true. So to summarize, please refer to the draft comparative analysis guidance for all the recommendations. Again, note that all design differences should be identified, adequately analyzed, and scientifically justified, and ultimately engage with us early during your combination product development. Thank you very much. This sums up for me. I will be back for the Q&A answer. Thank you very much for your attention.